has been a slew of bike launches last week from Jamis, Marin and Polygon, and today we'll be looking at one of the budget bikes in this launch. It's very easy to pick an expensive bike and say that it's good, but it's much harder to do that with a budget bike. But a lot of us are on a strict budget and want a bike that is not the fastest or the lightest, but something that is reliable, tough and versatile. So today I'm going to discuss the Polygon Path. Polygon Path 2 is a hybrid bicycle with a rigid fork and it comes with tried and tested technology. Priced at around 38,000 rupees, it's a good choice if you're looking for a bike that can be used as a commuter, a city bike, and also for longer weekend rides. The frame and the fork on the Polygon Path 2 is made out of aluminium. This is the same frame that Polygon uses on their more expensive Path 3 bicycle as well. So you're not being shortchanged when it comes to the frame. The frame features a sloping down tube, which gives you a much lower standover height, which is good for a city bike because you're constantly putting your feet on the ground when you're riding in city traffic. It also comes with internal cable routing, which makes it much easier to clean the bike. And another really good thing about the frame is that it has mounts everywhere. It has mounts for 2 water bottles over here. You'll notice that on the rear it has mounts for a mudguard, for a rack. It also has mounts for a front rack and a mudguard. So there is no dearth of mounts on this bike. The head tube on the Path 2 is non-tapered, which is not a big deal because I don't foresee many people changing the fork on this bicycle. And talking about the fork, a lot of you might be apprehensive about the bike having a rigid front fork. Personally, we are great fans of a rigid front fork. It has a lot of advantages. The first being the weight. Because this fork is made out of aluminium, it's much lighter than the steel fork. Secondly, when you compare it to a suspension fork, the difference in weight is huge. A cheap suspension fork weighs in at about 2.3 kilos, whereas a rigid fork would be around 600 to 700 grams. So there's a huge weight saving to be had over there. Another advantage of a rigid fork as compared to a suspension fork is that there is no maintenance involved. It also gives you much better feedback from the road, and your control over the bicycle is much better with the rigid fork. Needless to say, we are big fans of the rigid fork. We think the simplicity and lightweight is great to have for a new bicyclist. The drivetrain on the Polygon Path 2 is a mishmash of components, so let's discuss them one by one. The first thing to understand is that the drivetrain is a 3x8 drivetrain, which means there are 3 chain rings up front and there is an 8-speed cassette at the back. The bottom bracket in this case is a square tapered bottom bracket, which essentially means that the cranks are a 3-piece cranks. So basically the bottom bracket and 2 sides of the cranks. So the Pro Wheel CM99 crank, which has 3 chain rings up front. This crank is made out of aluminium, but the chain rings are made out of steel. Steel is heavier, but it is also more durable as compared to aluminium. You can see there are 48, 38 and 28 teeth for the 3 chain rings in this crank. The cassette at the back is a Shimano 8-speed Alto cassette. The smallest is an 11-tooth cog and the largest cog is a 32-tooth cog. These 3 chain rings up front combined with an 8-speed cassette at the back gives you a total theoretical gear combination of 24 gears. The shifting duties are handled using 2 integrated shifters. Integrated shifters means that the brake levers and the shifting paddles are integrated into the same block. The Path 2 uses mechanical disc brakes front and rear, and this is a Tektro M280 braking system, and this comes with a 160mm rotor and a cable actuated disc brake system. My experience with budget Tektro brakes has always been good. They're not the greatest brakes out there, but they're quite reliable and the braking pads are not that expensive. As with most budget bicycles, Path 2 comes with no-name hubs and a 32-spoke rim front and rear. In this case, I like the fact that it has a 32-spoke rim because more spokes means more reliability, and this bike is geared towards reliability, not towards outright performance. When we consider the tires, these are V-Tire Speedster and they come in a 700 by 40C size. These tires are around 1.5 inches in width. Now 1.5 inches is a great size to have on a city bike because it gives you a decent amount of volume to go over bad road, but it doesn't slow you down as much as mountain bike tires would. And this is also evident in the tread pattern on these tires. It's a very close set pattern in the center to give you lesser rolling resistance, and the tread pattern opens up on the side to give you a little more grip on hard-packed dirt trails. I'm quite happy with the choice of tires on this bike. The other components on this bike, including the seat posts, the saddle, the handlebars, all come from Polygon's house brand, which is Entity. 2 interesting things that I'd like to point out. It already comes pre-installed with ergonomic grips, which is a nice touch. The other interesting thing is that the seat post collar is a tool-less design, which means you can raise and lower the seat without using any tools, and I think it's a nice beginner-friendly touch. So things that I like about the Part 2, starting with the frame, is that this frame is shared with the Part 3, which is a more expensive model, so essentially you're not shortchanged when it comes to the frame. Also, this frame features internal cable routing, which makes it much easier to clean the bike. Third, it has a lot of mounts. I mean, it has mounts for probably anything that you would want to mount on this bicycle, which is a good touch because this is not a performance bicycle. This is more of a utility bicycle, and the more options you have to mount things, the better it is. Another small but nice touch is the fact that the seat post comes with a clamp and a toolless design, which makes it much easier to share the bike with other members of your family because you can raise and lower the seat height accordingly. I think at this price range, getting decent disc brakes is a good option. All said and done, we're big fans of rigid fork because it requires no maintenance and is quite lightweight as compared to suspension fork. And I really like the choice of tires on this bike. I think 40C tires are a great compromise between speed and comfort. And finally, the fact that it comes with ergonomic grips is a small but nice touch. It's small touches like this that give you an idea that somebody has really thought over the purpose of this bike. This clear purpose is also evident in the choice of 32 spoke rims, which prioritizes strength over performance. Moving on to the cons, the drivetrain is the weakest link on this bike. It's an 8-speed drivetrain, and the problem with 8-speed is not that it's not reliable, it's extremely reliable and cheap to maintain. The problem with an 8-speed drivetrain is that there is not much that you can upgrade without spending a lot of money. The 9-speed drivetrain found on the Part 3 is much more upgradable, and it also comes with a much nicer crank. My other pet peeve, as with most bicycles and also the Polygon parts, is the quality, or rather the lack of quality, of the hubs that it comes with. Polygon does not specify a name for these hubs, and I don't expect them to be any good. This bike also has old school geometry. There are no dropped seat stays. The steer tube is straight as well. It comes with a square tapered bottom bracket. Normally for a performance bicycle, these things would be unacceptable for me, and you have to realize that this is more of a utility bicycle. And now talking about upgrades, because of the nature of this bike, I would not waste time and money on performance. I'd rather spend it on improving the comfort and daily utility of this bicycle. The first thing that I would probably get is a good rear rack and panniers. A rack and panniers means that you can take this bike for small errands like grocery shopping or to the shop or even to work. The money spent on rack and panniers pays itself numerous times over with fuel savings. The second thing that I would look at is the 3 touch points, namely the grips, saddle and pedals. Because it already comes with decent grips and the saddle is a very personal choice, I'd start with upgrading the pedals. I think the Shimano PDEF202 pedals that we reviewed recently will go well with this bike. There should be a card up on the right with the link to that review. The third thing that I would get for this bike is a good set of lights for those early morning and late evening rides. Especially now with the monsoons coming up, a pair of quality lights makes you much more visible on a dark wet road. The Night Rider Swift 500 retails for around 2000 rupees, and this combined with the Night Rider Cherry Bomb 100, which is one of our favorite budget tail lights. Again, you can check out the review. I'll leave a link to the review in the description below. Finally, and the most important thing is to get a good pair of padded cycling shorts, or chamois as they're called. There's no bigger and better investment that you can make on your comfort on a bicycle than a pair of good padded shorts. The only tip that I would give you is don't buy the cheapest or the most expensive ones. Middle is where the value is at. Finally, coming in at around 38,000 Indian rupees, the Polygon Part 2 makes a compelling case for itself as a first bicycle or a city commuter and a weekend machine. It's a good looking bike with nice blue-green paintwork, and aesthetics is an important thing in my book. It doesn't come with the latest and the greatest tech, but you don't really need it on such a bike. What you need instead is reliability, utility, and a bike that is cheap and easy to maintain. A 3x8 drivetrain, while basic, has a gear range that will take you up the steepest Himalayan climbs and can top out at 50 kmph. Talking about maintenance, let me give you an example. An 8-speed Shimano chain comes in at under Rs 800, while an 11-speed comes in at over 3 times that price, which is around 2400 Indian rupees. So you know where the value is at. As I always say that there is budget and there's cheap. I try and steer people away from cheap bikes because they look good on paper with a lot of features, but they fail in the real world. A budget bike, on the other hand, does not have the latest bells and whistles, but it has the right basics in place. The same can be said for the Polygon Part 2. It is not an exciting bike, but it is well priced for what it is, and barring a few niggling details, it has the right mix of components in place. So before we give it our official Gear Llama rating, I'd just like to say that if you find our content useful and would like to see more bike unveiling like this, do consider subscribing to our channel and leaving a comment in the comment section below. Frankly, I would give this bike 3.5 out of 5 llamas for being good value for money and being an excellent starter bike for somebody who's just getting into cycling. And when you do get tired of riding a hybrid bicycle, here's an example of what you can do with it after a few years. Check it out and enjoy. This is Bharat from Gear Llama signing off. Have a good one.